We launched 15 years ago, and we had two launches, one in the House of Lords and one here back in 1995 as our kind of industry launch. And the reason we came into being was that it was clear that the environmental technology and services sector was, as in a way our chairman has already hinted, very dependent on government policy, and particularly government regulation, because that's the prime way of tackling this big problem that there's a market failure, as the Treasury like to talk about, a market failure in terms that we don't, on the whole, price into our market economy pricing system the costs of pollution, whether that's carbon pollution or water pollution, air pollution in terms of our health. And unless government actually intervene, either through direct regulation, the sort that SEPA and the Environment Agency control and regulate, or whether it's through taxes, like a carbon tax, which has been on the agenda, or like the emissions trading scheme, then the whole problem of whether there is demand for environmental solutions is not solved. So we realised that this industry needed to talk to government, and certainly at the time, this industry 15 years ago was made up of lots of small little companies who didn't know anything about lobbying. So our role in life is about taking our members' interests in terms of policy to government. And that can set the scene for my speech. If you want to know more about EIC, you can pick up our yearbook, which is on our stand S50. And there may be a few of you who are also interested in the whole issue of, well, we've got a small little company, we've got a new innovation, we need money to develop it. We also run something called the EIC Environmental Investment Network, which brings together companies and investors in the City of London and angel investors around the regions. And if you want to know more about that, also come to our stand. Anyway, more importantly, is this a threat or an opportunity? Well, from day one, of course, we've been arguing that environmental policy, irregardless of protecting bugs and bunnies and our health, of course, is the fact that there's a commercial side to this, and the commercial analysis is, from our perspective, largely that this is an opportunity. It's clearly an opportunity for the people who have stands in this hall, the environmental companies, who rely on environmental policy, again, whether that's regulation or taxation, I'll use the generic term policy, who rely on policy, not just in the area of climate change, but in the areas of tackling water pollution, air pollution control, etc. But all this policy and government intervention to tackle environmental problems is, of course, also an opportunity for the rest of British industry, in the sense that pollution of whatever sort is inevitably about inefficiency in industry. And it was interesting, Evan used an example from the 1840s. I'd use a more up-to-date example, which is that when, I think it was, believe it or not, a Republican administration in America introduced the toxic releases inventory, which required primarily the chemical industry in America, but other industries too, to report on the releases of about 180 dangerous substances, obviously things like mercury and cadmium and others. And the industry was in an uproar, just as we heard the railway industry was in an uproar back in the 1840s. Oh, this is the end of American industry, and all relocate abroad. Well, a few years after the government had the good sense to ignore those special interest pleadings, the industry, and particularly the chemical industry, started saying, wow, this has actually boosted our competitiveness, because we've started to record and think about all these pollutants that are going out down the sewer or out the chimney stack. They haven't come from nowhere. We've bought those raw materials in. Our processes have played around, created a product that we sell into our regular markets, but it's also created a waste product that we've been previously emitting to the atmosphere or to water or to landfill. And they said what this has driven us to do is dramatically improve our resource efficiency, how we process the raw materials that we take in. And in the area of climate change, of course, the big upside is that energy efficiency is such an obvious thing for us all as individuals at home, but also as businesses, to be seriously addressing. And the problem up until recently has been that the price of energy has been so low, and of course it's not included any price of pollution. So we've always argued controlling pollution, in this case climate change pollution, will be good for this environmental solutions industry and good for the rest of industry because they become more efficient. And some of you in that context may recall a book called Factor 4, came out about 15 years ago, and now there are books called Factor 10, Factor 15. What these mean are that we could actually, in our commercial world, in our industry, improve resource efficiency, that's the use of energy and other raw materials, by about 10 or 15-fold. Huge opportunities, they're not being addressed. There's a conservative mindset in a lot of industry. They need to realize that in this one particular area, climate change policy, I don't think there is any going back. All the parties are agreed. We've had a little trip over in the sense that the skeptics about climate change have been given an opportunity, thanks to the University of East Anglia, to question the science. It's now, I think the consensus reformed. There was nothing in all that, and governments all around the world are going to continue pushing to control carbon. So let's look at those opportunities. Interestingly, in advance of publishing the government's low carbon industrial strategy, the government produced some detailed analysis of what they call the low carbon and environmental sector. And let me give you an idea of some of the opportunities out there. They reckon that the environmental marketplace, including climate change solutions, is currently, in this country, a £112 billion market. That's a lot of business to go for. And worldwide, it's a £3 trillion marketplace. And it's growing faster than probably any other industry. So I advise everyone to start looking at it. And the starting point, of course, is to look at what policies are coming, because it's the policies that will create the market opportunities. And in that context, I come back to the point about what we EIC are all about, which is about lobbying. And of course, there's a general election on, so I better say a few words about that. We've published a kind of election manifesto. So in that, for instance, there are a range of ideas. But for example, we are continuing our campaign for a green investment bank, which we've been pushing on for some time. And I'm pleased to say all the main parties seem to realise that just leaving the investment challenge to private investors is not going to be sufficient, and they need to bring in a public angle to this, probably more in terms of a public guarantee backstop rather than actual public money. Another idea is the carbon reduction commitment, which many of you will be aware of. We think that that could be a lot tighter, thanks to lobbying by industries that don't want to get their act together over the last year or two. The government have backtracked a bit. It's not tight enough. The threshold in terms of what level of energy use that is caught by the scheme could be much lower. And of course, another idea is for the whole range of energy efficiency standards for the building sector, and particularly in the existing commercial buildings area. Now, I'll just quickly run through, and over questions I can tell you more, but let's see what the three parties are offering us. Labour and the Tories both want a green investment bank. They both seem to support in one way or another an awful lot of support for electric vehicles that the chair referred to. And there are different schemes to help householders pay for energy efficiency, home insulation. And there's a lot of support for things like small-scale generation. On close, having said that there are a lot of welcome ideas in here to highlight the fact that there are going to be something like 200 at least new MPs. And a lot of those current parliamentary prospective candidates are not necessarily that tied into the importance of the climate change policy agenda. So we at EIC are encouraging our members and the broader industry to get out and brief their prospective candidates over the next week or two and try and get them to sign up a pledge to raise issues of relevance to our industry in the new Parliament.